Hi, Joe.
You have hightailed it from Shelbourne, Derry City, FAI Cup final media day this afternoon. Damien Duff in great form, you tell me?
I said he was in chatty form. Did a lot of interviews. Went along the lines. Sort of, I think.
But not in great form. Then you're clarifying.
No, he wasn't. He was in good form. You know, good form.
Not great form.
But like, sort of, he was open enough. You know, about his feelings around the week, and people will see this pop up, you know, in various places at various times. But the overall general atmosphere, and like this is something he said before, so it's not breaking some embargo, but like he is genuinely talking about this as, like, you know, one of the biggest days of his football life. He's standing over that opinion that he put out there before the Waterford semi-final, that this is up there with anything, because he's taking a risk. He's out of his comfort zone. He never saw himself in this position, and he's doing it. Like, and you step back from it, like anything. I think the news cycle moves so fast in everything now that something is a story. Like around a year ago, this time Damien Duff was appointed, and everyone was like, "Oh my God, Damien Duff is managing," and then you just get used to it. It just becomes the norm. Like, it ceases to become a sort of a major talking point every week. But you do step back from it sometimes, and you think of, like, what a beloved figure Damien Duff was as a player. What a big, you know, World Cup 2002, big moments in your life. He's sort of, you associate, and he's sort of the manager of a League of Ireland side standing on the Aviva on Sunday. And it's kind of, whoever saw him in that position, like, you know, never one that was like, he'll go down that road. And that's why there still is, people maybe think there's too much about him, and I can understand that, but it is because he's genuinely a box office name, and he's involved in our national final on Sunday, which is, I think, a good thing for the game.
3 o'clock kickoff. Numbers good?
I think they're up over 28,000 tickets sold at the moment. Last year's final, Bows Pats, was the first post-COVID one. I think that was 37,000 in the end. Now, I think actually the sales apparently are tracking on a similar enough, you know, at this time last year, probably would have been similar enough now. 2 Dublin clubs last year. I'd be pleasantly surprised if they got to the levels of last year in terms of numbers, but weather's kind. I think the Premier League on Sunday is okay, but it's not like a massive sort of, you know, I think they wanted a low enough profile weekend, I think, before Qatar. No heavyweight clashes on the Sunday, I think, was part of the thing. So I don't know, maybe across the week the more discussion there is around it and the Duff aspect, and okay, Derry are bringing a huge crowd apparently. So yeah, I mean, I don't know, like, it's not our job. People sometimes think in media, like, it's your job to promote the game. It's not our job to promote the game. I wouldn't promote it if I didn't think it would be any good. But I think that there's enough storylines and good players involved that I think if people are looking to go to a good stadium to watch a game on a Sunday afternoon, you could do a lot worse than make your way to the Aviva, I think. And there's a little bit, you know, the sides have had some tight battles this year, some good players involved on either side, so I hope it to be a good final. But then I've talked up a lot of the cup finals, and then invariably you end up in a penalty shootout after a tense 120 minutes. I can't deny that that's a scenario you could see happening here.
Nobody wants to make a mistake, and all those cliches genuinely do come into effect. Derry, the favourites, presumably.
They are, yeah. They had a bit of an unfortunate one on Sunday where the last round of the League of Ireland games were on Sunday, and it was an utterly meaningless round of fixtures. There was nothing at stake, you know, like all the issues in terms of league, Europe, relegation, dusted. And Derry rested a number of their players for their game against Dundalk, but one of the ones they didn't rest, this guy Sadou Diallo, is ex-Man City academy player, new to Ireland this year, very good. A lot of people wouldn't have seen him. I'd say even league fans mightn't have seen too much of him. He got himself sent off on Sunday and he's out of the final now. That was unfortunate. Right. And he's a sort of a really strong midfield presence. He's become a big part of their side, so that's a blow. There's no doubt about it. But Derry still will be the favourites. You know, they have players. Shells have a minimal cup final experience. I think, you know, Duff brought his players, you know, to look at the stadium earlier this week just to get a favour for it. Patrick McElhenney from Derry, apologies, but had a long spell at Dundalk. I think it's his 8th cup final. So there'd be quite a few players in the Derry dressing room. Not a huge amount, but there'd be several who'd be very experienced in these days. And I mean, they finished way ahead of Shells in the league. Like, they were second. I think Shells ended up down in seventh in the end. But the games between them have all been tight. I mean, in Shells this year, they were the first team to beat Derry, and they also were the team who got the result to draw up in Derry a couple of weeks ago, which sort of ended Derry's title challenge. So they've been a little bit of a thorn on their side this year.
Yeah. If Shells don't win and they finish seventh in the table, what kind of a first innings for that is Duff?
Still good. Yeah, still good. Okay. From where they've come, to be fair, right? I mean, they're probably finishing according to their budget. Probably, like the three clubs below them would all be paying considerably less their squads. So they haven't outperformed. Their sort of parameters. If they win the cup, that would be the case. They would be outperforming, overperforming maybe relative to spend. But I think it's more the sense that maybe people sort of thought he'll jack it in here. This won't last. He's too combustible for this. Whereas actually, if you watch Shells across the year, there has been a pattern of improvement there. He's brought in some younger players across the year who are clearly improving. That have they've sort of they've come along and clearly under the coaching team have improved as players. Maybe some other players have fallen by the wayside, but it looks like a team that you think, not necessarily always translating to their results, but you can look at them and go, they have a bit of an identity. They know what they're doing, and they're going to get better. Okay. And I think they will spend more over the winter, whatever happens here, and they will be better. Yeah, I think the job. I mean, he was speaking about it today. I think he's been very demanding. And it's a demanding, exacting environment, but I think he'll be around there for a while. Okay,
well, that's 3 o'clock Sunday, Shelbourne, Derry City, FAI Cup final at the Aviva Stadium. And don't let those rugby types mess up the pitch on Saturday.
Oh, yeah, they probably will, won't they? Yeah.
Oh, give it a good
Fiji
shoeing.
on Saturday, though.
Give it a good shoeing.
It's an early kick-off on Saturday. It gives you a bit more time to sort of manage. I was down there today. They had the lighting over the pitch. I don't know if you've been on the Aviva on a non-match day, but they're always minding the grass as much as they can. But
there's not much sunlight.
Then these people just come along but the Irish rugby team not a bit.
People.
But is the Irish rugby team not a little bit better to watch now, though? It won't be as.
They're all big men.
They'll be gliding a bit more than sort of marauding their way around the place like they used to.
Less ploddy.
Yeah.
But they'll still do a good number.
Are they not a bit more likeable now, as in, they're not the team that stinks out the tournaments with dreadful play but wins? They're a bit more entertaining now.
You tell me, you're the one who hates them.
I don't hate them. Not at all. I mean, as I said, I'm mild ambivalence. So, I would
have said it was more in the hatred.
I know. I'm
distaste.
I'm around people who put on games, and it's not bad to watch on occasion. No, I'm just saying. I think it's actually harder. This is a complete tangent, but isn't it just harder as you get older to pick up new hobbies and new sports? You become more set in your ways. Do you know what I mean? You have to watch all array of sports for your work or whatever. Mm-hmm. But when it comes down to it, you don't have time to keep up with everything that you'd like to. If I even wanted to get into rugby now, how could I even? Where would you find the time to do it? To learn the nuances? It's gone. I'm just going to stick with football, golf, and racing. I'm happy. That'll do.
You had a story which people were very interested in this week. Minimum wage introduced into the League of Ireland as of next season. So minimum wage coming in, €430 per week. For full-time pros, 20 and over. Part-time pros, 130 per week. Had this been in the offing for some time?
Yeah, I mean, it goes back to last April. These talks have been ongoing, but this is pretty significant. There's a lot of things. I was writing a piece about it this morning. The last couple of years here, and it's we've been so busy with so many things going on in the world the last couple of years, but the Brexit thing stopping players from going to the UK until they're 18, huge, probably the most significant thing to happen in football here in a generation.
Yeah.
And now you have the situation where a minimum wage has been brought in, as you mentioned, and it's we are moving towards basically, certainly at the top division here, proper sort of full-time professionalism. The question mark is, and there's been a lot of response and feedback to this story, are we ready for it? Is this the skeptical view of this from clubs who don't have a huge amount of cash is like, yeah, I can see in theory this is a good thing. It's a bad thing that you're trying to proclaim players as professionals, full-time professionals with no other income, and they're getting like 150 quid a week. Like that's, and if you're not doing particularly well, the rules allow clubs to just keep retaining them at that wage, and like, what do you do? So it's the right thing to aspire towards, to have a sort of a proper, in an expensive country, to try and have a sort of a guaranteed wage for like full-time players. But clubs would say, well, we're not ready for this in some cases, and we're just going to have to sign fewer players. Or now, what will clubs do? Will they, you're waiting to see what the loopholes that people will look to exploit. Will they keep more players on amateur contracts, which is still allowed, pay them travel expenses, and say, well, you're not that good relative to other players. If you do well, we'll give you one of these contracts. It's not as if everyone in the league is suddenly going to be earning this.
Okay.
But it is moving towards sort of saying it's widening the gap between the haves and the have-nots. Like, for example, I don't want to get bogged down in the detail of this because there is a lot of detail in it, but for example, like even with the part-time players who are of a smaller wage, it would be pretty normal, standard culture here that they would only be paid from the minute that the season starts. So you could come in and do a pre-season of like 6 to 8 weeks with a club, train however many days a week, and you don't get paid until the first week of the season and the crowds start coming to your games. And then if you get knocked out of the cup and you've no game that week, you mightn't get paid that week. And all these things were sort of allowed based on individual arrangements. Now this has all been streamlined a bit, that even those players are paid from the first day of pre-season till the end of November. And you'd probably, at times over the years, we've had people on here about getting paid 38 weeks or 40 weeks or 42 weeks. Now it's pretty much going to be at least 11 months, and in a lot of cases sort of 12 months, no matter where they are. So it is a move towards trying to create some kind of industry here. But again, I would speak to people in clubs, and I have in the last couple of weeks, who would say, again, I'm repeating myself a bit, this is all great, this is all fine, but we've been hearing messages from the FAI in the last couple of years, there's funding coming, we've got good relationships with government, there's stuff coming around the corner here, and they haven't seen that yet these new regulations are coming in, and that's some of the pushback you're going to get. But I mean, players are delighted with this, and I think it's a positive thing, but not without its quirks. So
430 per week minimum wage, if that's paid across 52 weeks, then we're talking 22,000 euro plus 360 on the side. So 22,360 euro. Again, anyone living in Dublin or any part of the country is going to struggle on 22,360, not least if they have family to support as well. So still not a huge amount of money. What percentage do you suspect of League of Ireland players were getting less than 22 grand a year across 52 weeks as things stand?
Well, I think a lot of clubs that are probably paying proper 52 weeks, like something like Shamrock Rovers, for example, I can't imagine. I'd say most players, senior players there, are earning more than that, right? And this is the thing, the ones that wouldn't be would probably be younger players who are unproven, who would be like 17, 18 on professional deals. But it's probably easy for them to be on small enough money because they haven't proven themselves. Now, like, that's actually where a lot of this momentum has come from. I'm not talking about Rovers here because I think their conditions will be quite good, but in other places, young lads being signed as professionals on on a pittance,
But I would presume they can still be signed as part-time professionals on 130 minimum per week.
Well, at a full-time club, that's a bit of a grey area, because if they're being asked to train the same number of days as the full-time players, but then no, they're clearly full-time.
But what's to stop the club saying to the young player, we can only sign you on these terms, take it or leave it? That's
and this is where I feel that there's going to be more issues of this, of this nature next year. What is the definition of a full-time player, and what is the definition of a part-time player? Is it just if they have a second job or not? Or, there was a debate around this. Again, I know of one club where part of the discussion was, like, how many hours a week do you commit to football? Is it just your time in the pitch, or is it your travel there and back? And I think one club is trying to argue, well, it's just when they're on the pitch. It's like, well, I don't know, if you have to travel X amount of hours to get there, That's part of your working day.
Yeah.
And this is the thing, like, I mean, this granular detail in some ways it's sort of embarrassing to be having those discussions, but that's because clubs naturally are cash strapped, and at every corner they're trying to save every penny they can. But to back to your point, I didn't really answer your question about the percentage of players. Like, I would imagine, because you mentioned like 20 and over is 430. It's tiered, so for 19, 18, 17 year olds it's like maybe 280, 330, 380. But I would imagine that most young players in that bracket in this league, other than the really handful of like very exceptional ones, I'd say nearly all of them would be on below that threshold. Do you know what I mean? Like, as in, I think a lot of the 17, 18 year old young professionals in the country, unless they're really good ones who are going, like, who are in the first team already and going places, I'd say for all of those players it's going to be a pay rise now, or they just won't get those contracts. At Premier Division level, yeah, there would be quite a few full-time players earning less than 430 a week, definitely. And I've heard in the last week or two clubs have already started offering contracts to players for next season on 430 a week, players who previously would not have been getting that amount.
Okay.
It would have been, you know, I'd say like something like 300, 350 type thing.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? I'm not saying there's a dramatic jump,
Life-changing aspect.
but there would be players in the league who this would be 430. I think there's a handful of them, or, you know, this would be doubling or maybe in some cases tripling what they would have been on. And this has been brought in to stop the practice of clubs having professionals on really non-professional deals. You know, professionals in name only, but not in wage.
Okay.
And it's a big step, and it's generated a bit of debate. You see FIFPro, the Global Players Union, are talking about this, and other countries that don't have a minimum wage are asking, you know, should we be introducing this? So it is quite a significant thing, yeah.
Okay. What's the ceiling wage-wise in the league?
There would be players in the league earning probably $3,000 a week territory. Yeah, there would be. Yeah, no one will tell you that they are. Every club will tell you they're paying less than that. And so in some cases you might have sponsors or various people helping out. But no, there would be multiple players in the league earning sort of above €1,000 a week. Like, I think this is what I'm saying. Like, this won't change things for probably reasonably established full-time players. Really, it's more the ones that are younger, starting off, who want to get into the game. They're the ones who generally find themselves in you know, offer very poor money. But I think, like, I've heard tales this winter so far of, you know, middle of the road players who are established enough but not superstars going to clubs and looking for around 1,200, 1,400 quid a week. That's like the market rate for an okay established enough Premier Division player. But yeah, there will be some blue chip ones in a league context who would be definitely north of 2.5 per week, definitely. Yeah.
Okay, we'll take a short break. I want to talk to you about a few stories. Sepp Blatter and Katie McCabe both talking about Qatar today. One will be watching, one won't. And Martin O'Neill is in the headlines over the past week or so. His book serialised, and had interesting comments about how he felt he was perceived as a northerner in Irish football. So we'll come to that in just one moment. All the football coverage and Off the Ball is brought to you by Sky. All the football you love in one place across Sky Sports, BT Sport and Premier Sports. Back in 1 second. So I mentioned both Katie McCabe and Sepp Blatter talking today about Qatar. Sepp's quotes, catch the eye. He was speaking to a Swiss newspaper, and the headline, which has gone around the world: Sepp Blatter, president of FIFA for 17 years. Qatar is a mistake. The choice was bad. He says it's too small a country. He actually sounds so convincing now as an anti-Qatar lobbyist. He's making a strong argument against it.
Do you know the way people get to that stage of, like, you see, I mean, I'm not going to name them, but like various politicians who've been controversial figures, but then they sort of reach a certain point in their life where they become statesman-like as they get older. And are you meant to now forget all the other stuff?
Look, Sepp Blatter here, the voice of sense on Qatar. So he says it's too small a country. Football and the World Cup are too big for it. And he says, since then, as in since the initial bad decision, social considerations and human rights are taken into account. He will be watching the tournament from his home in Zurich, won't be attending. So Sepp Blatter, Qatar is a mistake, is the big headline.
Yeah,
thanks for nothing, Sepp.
Yeah, and he's not rolling back on Russia 2018 being a mistake. He sort of said, and this does tally, to be fair. I think he did say that the plan was Russia 2018 and USA 2022. And I think in the reportage, of the people who were really on that, they did say that was the Blatter thing. Like, you know, he liked the idea of the almost the Cold War, sort of east to west, sort of you know, Russia. Then let's give it to America. You know,
he really had a good feel for where geopolitics was going.
Listen, you know, he was all over that stuff. But I think he's made some references to Infantino living in Qatar now, so there was a few little digs in there as well. But of course, you mean. There was obviously that French lobby that was very much involved in the Qatar bid and Platini and so on. So, like everything with Blatter, it's wrapped in. That's a nice quote, but let's go back to the archive here and, you know, run over what happened at the time. And he does acknowledge a degree of responsibility because he was the president. It did happen on his watch, and here we are. You know, like on one hand, we're talking about there's that squad announcement today that looks interesting, you know, and then on the other hand it's like, what are we doing? Like, what the hell's happening? You know, and that's every day there's a squad, every day there's another disgraceful story.
Yeah. Katie McCabe then initially this afternoon caused a flurry of headlines because the line from McCabe in this press conference today as part of Ireland's November training camp in Marbella, the centrepiece of which is a friendly against Morocco, also going to the World Cup on the 14th of November. So she was speaking to the media virtually, as I understand it, for maybe 25 minutes, half an hour, and the headline was that Katie McCabe said she would not play in a Women's World Cup were it to be held in Qatar. And that obviously was a strong line. Since then, that's been clarified. So it seems maybe there was a difficulty in hearing the question, and she interpreted the question as, are you going to Qatar this year to watch the World Cup? Will you be there physically in the next couple of weeks? To which he said no. So I think therein lies the confusion, and so you'll see in various articles now there's a clarification at the bottom of it. She was also asked at one stage, would she be watching the World Cup? She said, I won't have time to watch it, to be honest. We're straight back into Champions League football. It's a fickle thing what's going on over there and the whole background around it. For me, if Ireland aren't in it, I don't really fancy it, so I think I'll be giving that one a miss. She said then more broadly, what's going on there isn't great, not a good look for football, but the decision has been made. The World Cup's a world stage. Obviously, Harry Kane wearing the rainbow captain's armband will be massive, and I think it'll raise visibility within the key issues that are in Qatar right now. And I hope other nations do that and take a stand while playing the games. So that's just some of what Katie McCabe was saying. I mean, on the not watching a point again, I think that has been blown up into an incredibly strong stance, whereas you read her comments, it is more really, well, Ireland aren't there.
I'm busy,
Champions League. It's less of a moral, philosophical stance as opposed to, you know, a few of those different factors. So they're her comments this afternoon. Again, not quite the headline I think people had thought earlier on.
No. Yeah, I don't know, like these virtual events, I wasn't in it myself, so I don't know like how it sort of played itself out, but I mean it is something at the moment that no matter how FIFA protest and want everyone to concentrate on the football, any public figure is going to have this question pitched their way, I think.
There was no question, it seems, or certainly no answer about the Glasgow dressing room up the Ra situation. I think maybe it was attempted to be asked once, and then again there was a problem with a microphone and there was no follow-up. So I guess, is there a general acceptance this thing is put to bed? I mean, this is the first time the captain has spoken in the aftermath. Yeah,
I don't know. Like it's you know, it can be a weird thing to, like, you know, sitting here talking about a press conference you weren't in. Yeah. But it would strike me as odd. Yeah, I mean, like as much as you can, I think, you know, a captain of a team probably at some point addresses that issue, and even if, you know, you would imagine they have enough time to think about it to come out and give a pretty comprehensive response. And I think if that's a sort of a good response, people probably will go, yeah, fair enough. You know, there's a lot of support for them, but yeah, pretty big thing that happened, pretty significant thing that happened. So it certainly, from this remove, would strike me as odd that it wasn't raised. Yeah.
Okay, maybe it's addressed again down the line in some capacity. Martin O'Neill's new book.
Yes.
So the headlines today, I mean, it's been serialised across several days. It was in the Sunday Times, for instance, at the weekend. But the, I suppose, headline which grabbed the eye today was his perception of how he was treated. I was treated as an outsider, as Ireland boss, a figure you hate. This, an interview with Steve Bacom. It's in the Irish Independent as well as the Independent across the water. So Martin O'Neill said he felt he was treated as an outsider, his word, and, quote, a northerner when he was the manager of the Republic of Ireland. The piece says the subject is one of many addressed in O'Neill's new autobiography on days like these. He says that the Denmark result became a point for the Republic media to throw everything at you in terms of criticism. He says, though, it was kind of storing up a little bit. The truth is, there were a number of times I was called the northerner or the outsider, and I was treated in many ways the same way as Trapattoni eventually became one of these figures you tend to hate. I think that was it. My persona didn't seem to fit with them throughout the time, and I'm even going back to the heavy criticism in the early stages of the 2016 European campaign when we were in the same group as Germany, Poland, Scotland and Georgia. I think if you're viewed as a bit of an outsider to begin with, then it's hard, regardless of results being okay, to win them back. That would be my thoughts on it. So he thought that he was viewed as an outsider to begin with, and from that point it was at best a standing start that he had to try and win them back over with.
Yeah, I think context is important here. The Stephen Beacon piece was actually a Belfast Telegraph interview, right? Okay. And the context for that is that the Northern Ireland job, there was a separate piece. The Northern Ireland job is up at the moment, and he was asked about that. Okay. And I suppose he played his international football for Northern Ireland, and he wasn't ruling himself out of being interested in the job, the Northern Ireland job. And I don't know, in that discussion, is there an element of asserting another side of your identity, relative to that audience? That's just my opinion, but that's the context, just for where this comes from. I covered the Martin O'Neill era from start to finish. It was probably pretty much every press conference. I'm not here to defend how media treated him, but certainly in my world, him being a northerner was never a thing. I don't recall it really being a discussion point or a sort of a flashpoint in any way. I suppose there might have been issues around the recruitment of players, born in sort of who would represent the Northern Ireland at underage level, and that was probably uncomfortable for him. But I don't really recall it being a big thing aside from that. This concept of him being an outsider, I don't really get that vibe at all. I'm not really going to go into internal. There would have been, I think sometimes it probably would have grated with some people that Martin O'Neill would be doing interviews and doing stuff on the side with say English media channels talking about how people in Ireland see them, and maybe that isn't. I never particularly had a problem with it, because if you have a good relationship with a couple of people and you're speaking to them, I honestly think media complaining about that is bizarre. But maybe that sometimes led to people grumbling about him in some ways, but I don't know. That doesn't really tell you. And I have to say, I actually I probably at times would have been described as being not too critical or being soft at times. I would have probably spent time with him at a couple of the World Cups. I found him quite good company, and I never really had a mad issue with his press stuff until, I suppose, the latter year or so in the job, and people would have seen some of his TV interviews with Tony O'Donoghue, and I think that probably shaped a lot of public criticism towards him. I think, I don't know, everyone had their own opinion on that type of thing. There's no doubt that he was someone who was following what people were saying quite closely, and I think that comes across in his book. The book excerpts at the weekend seem to largely be this is a match that happened. Here was the media response that happened. Here's how I responded to that. And there's an element of, well, in the end, I showed them type of thing. Now, I haven't read the book. I don't know how it deals with the Denmark game and his last year in the job and what happened. I'd be very interested to read that. I do note, just reading his interview with Matt Dickinson, that he wrote this himself, sort of handwritten notes, not working with a ghost who's leading him in a particular direction, which sometimes you could say is a good thing, but sometimes you could say is a bad thing, because I'd love to actually be able to put maybe more specific questions around certain things to get an insight into his view on certain things, like criticism from Matt Doherty and people like that, which clearly riled him I think he references Keith Andrews all right, but I'd love him to maybe address some of the criticisms of his style. I'm not sure if that is the case in this tome that has been produced. But the broader point, I don't recall there being a tone of, well, no, the issue is that he's some kind of outsider. I don't know. Now listen, walking by in his shoes and all of that, like I think at times, did Nick McCarthy feel there was issues towards him, even his Irishness at times, and maybe there's a strand of discussion of your work that people can find that, feel that might be the underlying issue behind certain criticisms. But I have to admit I looked at that, I was like, that's odd. I don't know, what do you like? Yeah, I don't know, do you recall it being a big thing of, oh, there he is, the Northerner?
No, not in the slightest.
Yeah, but that's yeah.
Not even in the slightest.
Yeah, I don't think that was even.
The only thing that gives me pause to say that is, as you said, walk a mile in his shoes. And it's interesting. He did say, I mentioned in the book when I initially said it to Roy Keane that I was considered a bit of an outsider. He wasn't so sure to begin with, but as time wore on, he was absolutely convinced of it. So again, that gives me pause to say, well, what were they seeing or what were they perceiving that made him think that? But my sense of O'Neill is that when he got the job, there was huge celebration universally. This was a great appointment. I interviewed him on occasion, and honestly, the first 15 minutes were spent talking about travelling down to Croke Park to watch his brother and his sense of Irishness. Now, not that that's a prerequisite to be accepted. I mean, if he was a Protestant unionist, then, maybe he might have sensed the cooling. It's not like, oh, you were okay because your brother played in Croke Park and you were of dairy extraction. But it just further underlines the sense that I felt he was easily embraced. This wasn't Jack Charlton arriving over to go home Union Jack flags. Maybe the most beloved figure in Irish football is an English World Cup winner. Yeah. So I never, ever, ever sensed it. I think what went awry with O'Neill was the football, the increasing sense from within the camp, which spread out and word filters out to journalists and then audience at large, and then Matt Doherty on radio to the effect that not enough was being done preparation wise on the training ground. So that was the big criticism. The Declan Rice situation, I'd love that to have been addressed. What was going on with the Harry Arter row, how was business being done, etc. So all of those things became issues. And then I thought the interviews with Tony O'Donoghue showed somebody who was thin-skinned and a little petty about the whole thing. And so all of that is what I think of when I think of the O'Neill era as it went on. I certainly don't think of Martin O'Neill, the outsider, coming in here to manage the football team. I genuinely never thought that, never felt that, and never sensed it. I remember when he was appointed, and I don't mind saying it because Luke Edwards wrote a piece in the Telegraph, which I never let him forget it in the time that followed, that he actually wrote something when he was appointed, almost suggesting there might be some unease towards O'Neill in some ways because of I think made a reference to having been a Catholic that played for Northern Ireland. I was like, no, that's not the vibe in the ground here. And in fairness, Luke Tucker, he was like, yeah, it was just one of those things, I suppose. And I don't know, we're having Jack Charlton, but we're not having the Celtic managing Catholic Martin. Nah. What certainly were things, as you said, were things with O'Neill, if he ever got a little bit testy. Again, it would have been probably a certain prickliness at times, but I didn't necessarily have a problem with that. That's his personality. That's the way he can be. Would have gone on a lot about, if Robbie Keane was younger and probably been, what else can I do with these players? And I think that probably grated on people a bit. There was never, ever, I don't recall a single discussion, even Joe, and listen, the way people are, they'll sort of away from the microphones and the cameras, and you go, what was he on about today? And you'll know the little mannerisms and quirks of managers and people, he was on about this again, he was on about that again. I just don't ever recall that being on the radar at all. He got, as I think about it now, there was a rolling of eyes and criticism if he talked too much about Clough or his playing days. That was the Clough Forest stuff. Sorry, that was it. Yeah. And that sense of any problems here, they ain't down to me. it's the tools I'm working with. That, you know, and Stephen Kenny has managed in opposition to that. He has never once criticised the tools he's working with, whereas O'Neill did. And O'Neill was on record numerous times saying, look, the players, in effect, is what he was saying. But I would just say one thing. Media are critical of the football, and we were here. But I'm sorry to read he feels that he feels that he isn't liked here, or that he's not held in
I don't think that's
high
true.
regard.
I don't think that's true.
I think there were criticisms, and all of these tenures tend to end in failure. I mean, even Jack ends, you know, he gets to wave to everyone at Anfield, but there was a degree of your time is up. But like I think with O'Neill and Keane, that era, some of that stuff around the fringes that we've just referenced is remembered, but ultimately they do have 2016. They do have the Robbie Brady moment. They do have the two of them arm in arm after the win against Italy and kissing each other and looking at each other and everyone behind them. Like, I feel, ultimately, I'm not his PR advisor and maybe he doesn't care, but I would almost suggest to him, there was criticism from media. Everyone gets that. Don't take that personally, because if you're managing Ireland, there's going to be bad results. You're going to be criticised. I would say lean into the fact that there were a lot of good days, and if you were to walk down Grafton Street, all you would get would be nods and Howie Martin and well done Martin. And if he was to sit in here and do an interview, it wouldn't be some grilling about, geez, you really messed things up you did a terrible job. There'd be a few questions for sure, but there'd be there were some good days as well. And did you enjoy it?
Yeah.
My sense reading the Sunday Times extract, and it was quite, we played this match, this happened, we played the next match, this happened. There was a lack of insight into the games. It'd be a big criticism just from am I going to buy this book or not? It was fairly like on the surface stuff. But then there were lines about how we beat Germany, and I wanted more time to gloat in almost I want to let the media know that, you know, I'm doing a great job here and really stuff it down their throats. I didn't actually get a sense of someone enjoying the job and was paying too much heed to the criticism. I dare say if I was the Republic of Ireland manager, I'd find it hard to shut off the criticism as well. It's a human thing. But I didn't get the impression reading the extract of someone who enjoyed his time.
Yeah, no, it's true. Like it and I said it does read a little bit more like a diary rather than a book. You know what I mean? In the sense of like, it's a chronological. This has happened, and
it's funny when you said he's worked off handwritten notes.
I was shocked to read that.
It was a little bit like McGeady scored a second.
It bit odd. Yeah. No, I take your point. Like, you know.
Do you not think you get a great reception if you walk down Grafton Street?
No, I think I was just thinking, imagine like there's a 10-year anniversary of like in 2026, like the team are invited back. If he's called out over the tannoy, is anyone booing? No. Like, do you know what I mean? I think there'd be a strong response. Maybe not the same warmth that you would have that Jack Charlton would have received, right? But I still think it'd be overwhelmingly positive. Like, you know, people who maybe didn't enjoy the football or whatever, they're not going to be going mad over the top cheering or like brilliant, but I think there'd be a quiet acceptance of like it ended particularly badly, and I think and I'd love this to be sort of teased out in future. I definitely do think there's a sense that O'Neill and Roy Keane are probably they get on well, but probably quite similar personalities in some ways, probably share a lot of views on people, both great players, both probably quite you can even sense in their punditry they probably would take a slightly dim view of some of the more fashionable managers who are coming up who've got great like reputations. Maybe the ones that haven't been great players, you kind of wonder there's a little bit there. And I sometimes wondered if between them there was like an echo chamber towards criticism, in the sense that, yes, like this line about Roy was coming around to my view towards the end of this being, like, were they just telling themselves that this was the case sometimes? And look, it was particularly bad in the last year. Keith Andrews comes in for it because, to be fair, he went really strong on them, you know, really, really critical about them. And I just think that the type of personalities they're the ones that don't forget. They're the ones. So O'Neill had whatever in the end, 2013 to the guts of 5 years with Ireland. But I think the way that he carries certain things that really, you know, niggled at him and hurt him probably, that last year is probably still too raw and too fresh. And maybe that's colored his whole memory of his time there.
Well, again, if he feels that from the beginning, because that's the key point here, even from the beginning he was perceived as an outsider, I dare say it wouldn't be the worst way to spend an hour to go back to the news articles the week he was announced and the week of his first press conference, and to see the warmth and the excitement that he had been brought
the dream team, you know, the dream team. Like
there were no crossed arms here.
I remember, like, he always made reference that home game with Scotland. It was June 2015, and I remember we used to do a little briefing in a side room after the main press conference, and I remember, like, it was a little bit of criticism, and he was tetchy and unhappy with that, and he would reference consistently later in the year when Ireland beat Germany and Bosnia, what about, you know, the grief you were giving me in the summer. I don't particularly have a problem with that. Like, you know, you get grief. He was brought in to qualify, he qualified. You're entitled to have a go back. You know? But that to maybe rewrite the history in the sense of saying that there was this underlying feeling of you're not one of us, that was in some way there. I just don't. I'd love to know. Presumably, right, he is a very specific recall of, like, he didn't name Pat Dolan, but he remembered a Pat Dolan column about after one of the games, after the Germany game. I'd imagine he would have people in his mind when he's talking about this. I'd love to hear who they are. I'd love to know that maybe we're not listening and hearing everything. Maybe he was told some comments were made somewhere that might lead you to believe that, but I certainly didn't.
Yeah, I found as his time went on, he was such a prickly character and so quick to get a jibe in that it was hard to warm to him as it went on. It had nothing to do where he's from. And by contrast, so O'Neill would still get a great reception at the Aviva or around Dublin. Giovanni Trapattoni, if he was brought out now at the Aviva Stadium or he walked down Dublin, would get the warmest of receptions. And that was because he wasn't in the country and because he didn't give a damn about what Dan McDonnell and Joe Molloy had to say about anything. He was like, you guys, your opinion is so irrelevant to me, Giovanni Trapattoni. It's water off duck's back. So he flew back to Italy. He either never heard it or never cared to hear it, and therefore he never got into this prickly back and forth with the media, by extension the Irish public, because when Tony O'Donoghue is asking you a question, he's asking on behalf of everybody. And so it was never like this jibe back and this personal jibe back. Giovanni was always just like a gent to the end. Could you imagine if he was brought out at the Aviva? Incredible reception, and his football is now harked back to
it's true,
critical terms, and yet there is an affection for the man.
It's true.
So, but I think that's a personality thing. He's an outsider as well. He's literally the guy from Italy who's in press conference in 2012, and he's talking to the Italian journalist, and he's like gesturing over to the Dan McDonnells of the world, saying "Non è campeones."
Look at these.
They're not champions. They don't understand, people, like, and we forgive him that.
I know, and like, and
so that was the ultimate outsider coming over and saying, "These guys, they don't know anything about anything."
Yeah, no, listen, I think that's bang on, and I think as well though, like. And like part of probably what made O'Neill very successful, like I think he always has that little bit of a combative streak in him.
Big time.
You know, like you would have spoke to people when he was appointed, and they would have, like other media who'd worked on him, they would say that, and like that's part of makes him what he is. You know, so like he wasn't he wasn't coming into, like, some managers will come in, sorry to cut across you, will come in and they could be a lot more jovial. But it may actually be quite insincere. Well, and I actually quite, as I said, I never particularly had a mad problem with it, because I thought, well, this is who he is, and he can be a little bit sort of niggly and like, so what? Like, but if you lose, obviously that looks dreadful. Like, that's the problem. It's a great attitude when you're winning, but when you're losing, that obviously sort of, you know, drains goodwill. And unfortunately, that last year was just so bad, then it looks worse.
And let's finish off in a very fair way, because again, all these ingredients go into making up who he is in his totality, and he could get a big win with any of the teams he managed. And I was speaking to a former Irish player who had worked under him, and again, that prickly, difficult aspect to his character, he could come in, big team, big game week, big build-up, it's a certain tone, be an aggression, there'd be a niggle, and like there'd be almost the tetchiness about the whole camp, and then you'd go out and it would just come out in the night and you'd get the result, and he's there and jumping up in the air like in his Celtic days, like some of it which was, you know, we're saying led to a prickliness when things weren't going well. Geez, some of those ingredients made him like this manager who could get a result. Like, he could get a result. So you have to, you know, in fairness to him, it's a 3D version, but I really hope he doesn't think he's disliked or that he's seen as Mr. Northern Irishman. No, I don't know. I just said that's off. I think the discussion, the context of that discussion is probably important to framing those quotes maybe a bit.